Good morning to the best looking podcast that you're going to have in a very long time, I think. One, Anthony Franco is in Mexico, and apparently they ran out of the internet in Mexico, which, I don't know that we totally believe, but we'll let them have the pass. So I'm going to bring on David early just so I can read the hook with David. Welcome, David. Thank you for joining us. David, in 1970, Paul Hersey and Ken Blanchard introduced situational leadership theory, challenging the prevailing belief that effective leadership required a fixed approach. While major corporations spent decades implementing rigid customer service protocols, they overlooked this crucial insight. Different customers need different kinds of support. Today, most successful service cultures don't just solve problems, they read emotional cues and adapt their approach accordingly, creating loyalty that price-cutting competitors can't touch. Today, David, on How to Founder, we're talking about embedding empathy into service culture. I'm Chris Franks without the weird, probably he's got a sunburn. Probably he's, probably got some indigestion from some Mexican food down in Cancun without Mr. Anthony Franco. But I'm very glad to be joined by a much more intelligent, smart, better looking, and probably successful David, Mr. David Sidoni. Mr. David Sidoni is disrupting the real estate industry through his How to Buy a Home podcast with 1.8 million downloads. I don't even know where that ranks. That would take us on our current trajectory 27 years to reach 1.8 million downloads on this podcast. But where he educates and advocates for first-time home buyers, a traditionally ignored consumer group. His passion project evolved into a revolutionary business model that prioritizes education over exploiting, proving empathy can be profitable. David, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. You have a wild backstory that we were just talking about. So, but we won't go into the whole backstory. What is the weirdest thing you saw on a movie or stage set? What is the strangest, weirdest experience you had doing a movie or TV show?
Well, I can give you two quick nuggets. Number one was when I was in a music video with Michael Jackson, and he was standing so quiet, so shy, so nothing on the side. And the choreographer came over and said, Michael's about to jump in, get ready. And we were all like, okay, whatever.
Sure, yeah.
Because he's quiet and we'd been rehearsing for 2 weeks. The music came on and it was like lightning bolts coming out of his fingertips. It was like, all of us were like, damn, we got to go.
First of all, I don't feel like we can continue the podcast until we know which music video with Michael Jackson you were in. That is freaking amazing. And I think I could die a happy man if I was in a music video with Michael Jackson.
Depending on how old you are, you might remember it was a giant world premiere. It was called Black or White. It was the first.
I love that. It was great. It was on MTV every 15 seconds.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. I was one of the Russian guys.
Oh, I like it. All right, kids, there's this thing called MTV, and there used to be these things on MTV. They used to play music.
Yes.
If it's even worth. All right, David, explain what service culture is. Start with just the very why should I care about this as a founder? What is the underlying thing here? What is a service culture? Why should I care about it?
I think for me, looking at my niche, which is first-time home buyers, at some point, I looked back at the average age of the first-time home buyer in the last couple of years, and then I looked at Yelp, and I realized that the average home buyer, which jumped to 38 years old, which is way too old, they've had Yelp since they were like 15, which means the average consumer has been more than just talking to each other at the beauty shop or the diner. they've been looking at the service of every company out there in their pocket, in their phone. Every decision they've ever made, when them and their 18-year-old friends are taking their graduation road trip and they drive around, they're pulling up Yelp to see what's the best restaurant and hotel and thing to do in that town. That communal review, that hive mentality means that the wow factor of customer service is at an not only an all-time high, but it's being discussed continually over and over again. And having that as part of your business and your business model is going to be crucial so that people will be interested in your company.
Here's the thing that's wild is what you just described is so common sense for every industry except for early stage founders and startups. For whatever reason, and there's this entire kind of movement called blitzscaling, which was, hey, we don't really care how we treat our customers because we're growing so fast. There's always more customers, out there. And famously, PayPal, this is Reid Hoffman's thing. PayPal said, there is crazy customer disputes. Like you would leave the building and things would be metaphorically on fire. The problem is that was probably true 8 to 10 years ago, maybe 12 years ago when I don't know, maybe PayPal's 15 at this point. But the reality is your reputation matters so much more now in a world where the moment you launch a new app, it'll get a review. The moment that you go out into the world and launch a new service, if it's marketing, if it's anything, you really will start to have that customer feedback and ranking you immediately. And so even just that mind shift is a brand new thing for at least a lot of startup people that have been doing this a long time for us to even consider.
I think a lot of people have a little bit of an old school mentality, and because I was in show business means I was in the restaurant business before
That's
I
exactly
got a
right.
gig.
You didn't even have to say that.
Yep.
Like I was an actor, which means like, okay, where did you wait tables?
And and the best restaurant manager was the one who told me something that all founders should know. And it's very simple, that the 1 in 100 customers will tell their friends about how great something was, whereas 1 in 10 customers will tell someone if they had a bad experience. And the idea that when you're doing that super scale, that hyperscale, that blitz scale, and you're thinking the product, the service is going to win the day. I made a better widget. That's going to be the thing. That's just the front end. The back end is on a megaphone now. And to understand that how people talk about the service, if we're I don't like to say entitled with the millennials because I don't necessarily 100% agree with that, but I do understand that there's an expectation from consumers right now. If you create a bitchin' app and I go and I open it and it works like it's supposed to, I'm not going to tell the world. But if then a product or something that I buy from you, I need customer service and your customer service stinks, I am going to tell the world, because the internet is full of trolls and angry people.
That is very true. And one needs only scroll through more or less
Anything.
probably the comments on our videos just to say, was probably evidently true to everybody except for Anthony. All right. So if I start to think about this, like I need to not only use, and we think about empathetic design, we think about customer-centered design when we're building products and services. But really, I need to start thinking about this throughout every part of my business. It sounds like what you're saying. It's like I need to start to embrace this idea that how you treat your customers from the very first point through the point where they're customers for life needs to be something I consider as a founder very early and very often.
Yes.
All right. So yeah, yes. So I think that the interesting question is, how do I start to get my mind wrapped around this? Like, I know that I've got to start trying to think more empathetically. It's critically important, like you said. So the question now is how? Like, what are the steps that you would recommend for me in building a new product or service where I'd start to really think and put myself in the shoes of the people that are going to be using it?
I think that getting into the basics and really a lot of times founders, you go back to the E-Myth Revisited, and you've got Sally the pie maker, and then you need someone with management skills, and then you need someone with franchising skills. Um, what isn't talked about in E-Myth is your marketing person. And so a lot of times the founders, maybe the idea person, but a lot of the basics of finding empathy goes into marketing 101, the same way that you build your website, trying to make it as frictionless as possible so that people can get to what they're looking for. Break that down to the essentials and the basics of your product or your service. Where are the empathy points that solve pain points within whatever your service is? And if you're offering something and part of what you do, like everybody who found something, well, we made a better widget. Okay, cool. Well, what does that better widget solve for somebody? And how does that work with your competitors? And then you just turn everything into, look, right now you have option A to solve this problem in your life. Our option is going to take away pain point 1, 2, and 3 that doesn't get solved with this, because we know you wish you had things that were easier, faster, more affordable.
So, I mean, it feels to me like you're the perfect person to have this conversation because even before we came on, you were talking about how miserably painful it is, particularly for first time home buyers, to go buy a house. And you built your service kind of around those core points, right? So, like, tell me about the steps that you went through when you were talking to your friends that were buying first time homes, and even before you started the business. Like, talk about how the practical steps were like, yeah, that sucks. That's terrible.
I the first thing I saw was retroactive, the hole in education. When I was 21 years old and got in a movie and moved to Hollywood, I was renting. And if there had been, and when I asked my family and my dad, who was a bright guy, all he told me to do was to buy life insurance and set up a retirement.
Sounds great. Good
N-
advice.
Nobody said, how, geez, you're renting for how much? Okay. Back then, $5,000 down, I could have got a $50,000 condo, and it would have been nicer than my, $1,500 a month apartment.
Right, where they had not replaced the carpet in
Yeah.
6 or 7 years. Right.
So I looked back at my 9 years up in Hollywood, and $104,000 in rent was what I spent, which is something like $240,000 today. Um, so the first thing that I saw was the hole in education. And that hole is there because of the business model where the professionals who serve first time home buyers don't get paid until you close. So the idea of helping somebody 6 months ahead of time, that really stretches out your hourly salary when you're looking at how much time you need to put in. But systematizing that means that you can fill your pipeline and still give the people the service that they need in a giant hole. So I think the first part of the understanding for me was realizing where I could fill for the competitors. And then the the next part is really pulling back the curtain. It's one thing to say what I do is better than my competitor. It's another thing to say, "Hey, everything sucks in this entire business and they're all trying to fleece you."
Yeah.
But there's a small, small, small percentage that don't. And so I would recommend using them. Now, you can't just start out saying that. You have to jab, 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 jab before you right hook. You got to give. And so for me, understanding how to create an educational and empathetic and empowering system for a service-based business, um, while not ignoring the fact that you still need to eventually make money.
It's again, it seems so common sense in the vast majority of stuff, and yet it's not something it's like tends to be that last piece that we think about. It's like, oh yeah, we have the pain ourselves. Like it's like, oh, we understand how difficult the vast majority of people that go out and start companies is because they're frustrated that that solution doesn't exist, at least successful companies. So they go through and they try to figure out ways to solve those problems. And in so doing, so they're being empathetic to the problems that they have. And then when their first customer has a problem, they're like, ah, screw 'em." It's like, it doesn't it doesn't make logical sense, but it tends to be, I think, how we behave. All right. So what I heard from you is, as you were looking at this big problem, you saw that like the incentive was really just the transaction, but the pain point was really kind of the education, everything leading up to that transaction. So you started to think through what were like the pain way before most people came into that equation, which I think is really smart. In our world, we use a thing called empathy mapping, but usually our empathy mapping is around the product. And what you did is went way upstream, like years upstream, before you would actually have even contact with this person to find out all those gaps in knowledge and experience. I think that that's a pretty intelligent thing. All right. So as we go through this path, now we're starting to say we're trying to figure out a way to have our team, our people actually care. There's this weird thing that I find when you call big customer service and they're like, hey, I need to change my password. And they immediately go, I understand how changing your password can be frustrating. It's like, no, it's not frustrating. I just need some help. It seems like maybe there's this robotic empathy that's being created in some big companies. Have you noticed that?
Oh, tremendously. As someone who was on the other side of the camera and now on the other side of the camera and the microphone all the time, the roboticness of reading a script, um, especially to the younger generation, that's a huge part that people need to understand. I just read an article. There is now a college course to teach Gen Z how to talk to customer service because they never have, and they're scared to death of it. And this is true. I have a freshman in college. I've experienced this myself. I then started having that conversation with people. I started having it last year because my son got type 1 diabetes when he was a freshman,
Hmm.
and now in high school, and now he's having to call and deal with pharmacists and medical supplies that get sent to him. And my wife and I have done it, and he has no clue. So
Right.
the less human that the person on the other end is, the more scripted they are, the more fear and trepidation that you create in your customer who just thinks that they are a number and they're not a valued customer. And you don't feel like a valued customer because someone says, "Thank you for calling. I understand your frustration.
Right.
You are a valued
You
customer."
are a valued customer. Like that doesn't make me feel like a valued customer. It's a bizarre series where we've gotten like almost less empathetic and by trying to put in the words but not the feelings.
Yes, absolutely. I think
Uh,
it's like what you and I do. We're interviewing. Like there are simple interviewing classes 101. If you watch the best late night talk people and whatever, they don't read from the card and go question to question to question to question. They ask the first question and then they react. They whatever the person says, that's what you were talking about. How do you be empathetic to all different skills of customers, all different personalities? It's simple. Talk to them, let them talk, and then you need to be able to read. Okay, this is an engineer, analytical person. I need to give them the facts and the figures. Okay, this person's whining like crazy and wants me to agree with them, or this person's freaked out. I need to make them feel okay.
It's by the way, my son got, like credit card stolen, or the number was stolen. I think he lost the credit card, but it got stolen. He's a freshman in college too. And it's like, no problem. I can't do this for you. It's your account. You got to call them and say your credit card number was stolen. You would have thought that I asked him to get a filling without Novocaine. Like it was terrifying. I was like,
Yep.
call them. Is there a chat? It's like, no, you have to call them and say your credit card number, which again, kids, there used to be these things called phones. And they were hooked into the wall. Long story. All right. So we know that now we have this dual problem. We have this tension, which is we live in a world where we need desperately more empathetic approaches. We need to go and try to understand our customers. But what we just described is this culture now where there's no real empathy. It's just robotic empathy. And so how do we do that? Is it just hiring the right people? Do we go find a bunch of people that can do improv to be able to, actually react to other humans? Or is this something you can truly, genuinely embed in your company?
My dad was a sales representative for 35 years. And so I got taught all the old school stuff, Zig Ziglar and Tom Hopkins and all that stuff when I was a young child. So I go IBM. If you're an old school person, IBM was the gold standard because their sales training was the playbook for how to build a sales team. I don't understand why people haven't done that for customer service. Build a playbook. You don't have to hire improv actors. You just have to train them instead of hand them a script with little binder flips, little flags.
Yeah, little things that come up on the screen that say,
yep, say this now. He said this, say that. And then the other way is 21st century branding. The way that the Gen Z perceived individual who one day may have to pick up the phone and call you, if they find your product online or somewhere through your retargeting, you can then show them, because they will have expressed interest, their social media algorithms will now show you again and again and again. You have to understand where your customers' eyes are. And if the phone call is 1% of their interaction with you over the lifespan of their purchase from your company, you can reinforce empathy through your branding and who you are to the world, because once they find you, yes, I could say, if you're spending any money on social media advertising, then you should 1,000% be showing empathy through other social media posts besides your ad, because it will continue to go in their feed because they've expressed interest in it.
Yeah, it strikes me that, even though that in my mind, as we're starting this conversation, it's like, okay, how do I train my employees how to create that culture? The reality is that it's everything that you do. It's starting from building a brand. Can you build a brand that expresses that you actually care about the problem that's being solved, and you actually care about the people that you're serving? I'm struggling with this single point, and I just want your take on it. Can you teach empathy? Is it just a matter and it's okay, we're startups. We can go find empathetic people to hire. You might have to pay them a couple bucks more, but I don't know that you can give a crap. I don't know that that's something that's teachable. Do you think so or no?
I don't think it's teachable, but there's a reason why the word culture is to the point where it almost makes a lot of people want to vomit when people talk about businesses.
Right.
There was a reason behind it. And so you can create a culture that expresses that, and then you can give techniques, you can give systems. One of the greatest real estate coaches I still have the CD. That's how long ago it was that he sent me this thing called
So
Limbs.
kids, we used to have these things called CDs.
Yeah.
And
You use them as coasters now.
right.
Um,
Exactly. They're ironic decorations.
yes.
Now, right.
I keep seeing the little cassette tape like phone holders now,
Yeah,
phone
those are pretty
covers.
cool. Yeah.
Limbs, listen, isolate, mirror, solve is from Brian Buffini. It's one of my favorite things I've ever heard. And so, can you teach empathy? No. But can you? Fine. You want to be a tyrant of a CEO and everyone in customer service follow, listen, isolate, mirror, solve. And so you listen to what their problem is. Then you make sure we isolate it down to one problem and we're not talking about multiple different problems. Then you mirror them. I always think it should be limbs and you should be mirroring them at the top. But if you mirror, if you listen, I don't care if you are a robot, you're going to be more empathetic than a customer service team that is dedicated to learning the scripts and trying to burn everybody through as fast as they can. So I don't know if it's teachable, but I think it's techniquable.
It's funny, like I've kind of switched my position because when you say listening is a skill. It is not innate. We have forgotten how to actually listen to people. I don't know that to be forgotten. I just think that in a day where most interaction for our children has been on screens, the idea of sitting with somebody and listening and going and actually listening or asking a probing question is just not as common. So I think that's teachable. Mirroring is teachable. Reacting with, like, okay, I think those are is so is it teachable? I mean, I think I'm switching my position. I'm not sure that I know which side of the fence I'm on.
You're talking to a guy who, like, his wife said, you're only happy when you work with your friends from Disneyland. And I said, okay, I'm going to make a company that helps them, and just pulled it out of my butt. So I will now, and then I studied my face off to learn everything about entrepreneurs and what they do. So I've never thought about this. I've never said this out loud, but I'm about to go through an AI training with my small team right now. And one of the things I'm going to do is have them listen to a podcast, watch a seminar that I went to and I got the video of it, and then give me a book report. And on the clock, it's an hour. So I'm going to pay you 2 hours. And the book report's due next week. Why couldn't you take your customer service team and immediately take every great book you've ever read on listening? Because you're a CEO. And if you're in sales, you've definitely read some. So yeah, it's teachable. Pay them 2 hours. Give me a book report on listening. And then make sure you download the software to dissect their book report to see if it's AI generated. So that's another story.
My actual day job is teaching students at CU Denver Business School, and that's why I have them do actual stand up in front of a room and do reports, because frankly, AI can write better papers than I can. So why would I try to make them do something that I'm not that great at? Okay, so here's what I've got so far, just to recap, which is this has to be something. So it's important. It is one of those things that we don't really think enough about. B, it has to be part of your entire culture. It's not something where you can just say, like, I'm going to hire great customer service. It's about using that empathetic approach that we use to solving problems, and we use it for treating people all the way through. And then 3 is whether or not we can even agree that empathy is a teachable skill, or the skills to reflect. I think maybe I'm falling on the fact that everybody has some level of empathy, but we just need to try to make sure that they've got the skills to then show and demonstrate that level of empathy. Is that, I mean, it's again, I think this is a really murky waters, but it's an interesting part of the conversation.
I think if the company itself is speaking less to how great their product is and more to the problems the product is solving, and then go one step further and how that's going to affect and to change the lives of our customers. Then that's the first way, because then when people come into the company, they're not just hearing about the numbers, the bottom line, the systems, and the salary for the job. They're hearing that the company has some sort of mission. And then I think the second thing, like you went through your 3 points, I don't know if necessarily everyone has some sort of empathy, but I mean, create a new disc instead of DISC, have a E, you know,
Right.
and and maybe you hire someone with less of a resume or a skill set than somebody else, because within your interview process you ask questions to discover their empathy level, and because you can teach them skills, but you can't necessarily uh recreate empathy within them. You can teach them how to sound empathetic, but you can't teach them how to, just be empathetic.
Right. All right. So gonna go to the speed round in a second, but talk to me about we talked about the individual skills and the framework that you gave. How else would you recommend actually thinking through the framework about how the what empathy is? How could I teach it? How can I hire for it? Is there any other advice you'd give me as a founder to say this is really your job now to inject empathy into every part of the organization?
I think when you're talking to your team, one of the things that for me is an easy way to inject is i- to think about the usual ways that people may have frustrations about their job, the mundaneness of what they do, the feeling that they're not um, that they're not contributing, or that their contributions are not being lauded enough. Well, an easy way to do that is to talk to your employees and to say, "Hey, instead of having a sales, a bonus at the end of the month where whoever gets, the highest number, let's talk about whoever has the best customer interaction, um, and let's reward that." And then even to a more even simplistic level is to reiterate with the individuals that, hey, within your customer service, that you are helping all of our clientele, where are the moments that you feel like you have a personal skill that makes them feel better about that, and tell us that so that we can tell the rest of the team. If you go and you ask them, what empathetic strategies do you implement, because I want to make that the standard operating procedures. That's
It,
leadership 101. Tell people what they're doing is so bitching, you want everyone else to do it.
but it's what you just said is so brilliant because you have to care. You have to care about your employees in the same way that you care about your customers. Because if they don't feel cared for, there's no freaking way they're going to actually be empathetic to your customers. They're like, screw this. I get paid minimum wage. Like, I
Yeah.
don't see a pathway here. Like, whatever. But because they don't feel like you care about them. It's striking. Like when you call those big, call center places, you got to wonder, like, they don't care. Probably because their supervisors don't care about them. They're on some sort of clocked metric thing where they don't feel human, they don't feel cared for. That's a really, really good point. All right, we're gonna move into the speed round. Watch this incredible. As a TV guy, you're gonna appreciate this incredible graphic.
Little
First
who
question of the
wants to
speed round is, what did you think about our graphic? Like that was
I think it had a who wants to be a millionaire sound, which combined with the old school, or the IMAX crispness of the graphics at the beginning of the IMAX movie when they do the countdown. So that's a
I agree.
10 out
Yeah.
of 10.
I think we may have stolen the sound. I hope we don't get copyright infringement.
No.
We're
Every
stealing it.
seventh, if you change every seventh note, you don't violate ASCAP rules.
There you go.
So,
Exactly. I'm definitely sure that we did that for sure. All right. Should founders personally handle difficult customer interactions or delegate them entirely?
1000% depends on size of the company, and most importantly, in today's world, it can depend on the style of company. If you have a face, if the founder is the face, it's great to do a Dave Ramsey style call in and answer a few customer questions so that everyone else can use it as a learning piece.
I like it. Is empathy something you can be trained on, or should you hire for it exclusively? We talked a little bit about it. What do you think?
I think it can. I think everyone wants to be empathetic. Therefore, it's a goal that people will aspire to. No one's going to say, "I don't want to be empathetic." Screw that. So yeah, you
Does,
can
does
prod it.
transparency about company limitations build trust or undermine confidence?
Ooh, say that one again.
Yeah, if I'm saying like, hey, I really want you to do this, and we're like, hey, sorry, we just don't have that ability. Does that build trust or does it undermine confidence?
In today's world and today's consumer, it builds confidence.
I agree. Should frontline service staff have authority to make exceptions or follow strict policies?
To a degree, yes, they should.
Except for if they're going to give away your car.
Yeah.
I think it's probably a pretty good idea. Last question: do customers ultimately care more about speed or feeling understood?
Wow, that is a very hard question for me.
So I think it's probably both.
Yeah, I mean, I want to say 50-50, but I kind of feel like depending on the product, there's a generation that just wants to click, click, boom.
Yeah, I think it's fair. I'm taking away some pretty interesting stuff. I think number one is that this is important to map out and think about how you treat customers as part of every part. It's as important as branding. It's as important as building a great product. I think that we settled on both. You hire for empathy and train skills to help bring empathy. And third, you actually have to care. You have to care about your employees. If you don't care about your employees, there's zero chance that they're going to care about their customers. Tell me the limb, the thing that it was listen,
Isolate, mirror, solve.
Listen, isolate, mirror, solve. I'm going to see. I put limb, not limbs. That was good. All right, for deep dive recommendations, I've got a couple. The Effortless Experience by Matthew Dixon, Nick Toman, and Rick DeLisi. Never Lose a Customer Again by Joey Coleman. Uncommon Service by Francis Frey and Ann Morris. And The Customer of the Future by Blake Morgan. But most importantly, we're all going to watch your podcast that has a few more, just a couple more downloads than we have, like just one or two. Where can we find you? Where can we tune in? Where can we listen to your podcast? Learn all about the good stuff that you're teaching.
Wherever you listen to podcasts, How to Buy a Home. And if you want more information, everything's at howtobuyahome.com.
Howtobuyahome.com. And there you will be informed, inspired, entertained.
Correct.
And I'm loving the believe sign over your right shoulder. I mean, we've got some good. Oh, I'm gonna think like a goldfish. The soccer.
Yeah.
Show. Oh, Ted Lasso. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm a Lasso head.
I mean, who's not? He's amazing. I wanted him to be my coach. That's pretty.
Yep.
Well, David, thanks again so much for joining us today. Really, really interesting conversation. And as per usual, I learned a bunch, but also I think I kind of changed my beliefs along the way. It's like, oh, that's how you do it. Like, actually, probably not. I also like the idea of somebody out there, some enterprising entrepreneur, like come up with a new disc. It's just right.
Disky,
which would be like I think most people would want to use that in some form or fashion. awesome conversation. Appreciate it again. Thank you for joining us. Tune in on Thursday. We have, I believe, making emotional connections to customers. I think we have a thing on Thursday, or maybe Anthony's going to be still in Cancun, probably working off that sunburn. Got to wear sunscreen. That's my big thing. Thanks again. Appreciate it. And we will see you next time. Don't forget to subscribe for my own mental health. Have a good day.